Welcome to part 2 of the React series. In this video, we will be installing our React application using the Create React App toolchain, and I will explain to you what each file and each folder in the package means. So let's get started. Alright guys, before we start, let's quickly recap what are the prerequisites before we start. Of course, you need JavaScript knowledge, we need Node.js and npm installed, VS Code as our editor of choice, and Chrome browser. So once we have done that and if you installed that, a simple way to check if you have everything installed is to actually key in node-v, which gives you the version of node you're using, and npm-v, which is the version of npm you are using. So I'm using node version 12.15 and npm 7.8. So if you take a look at how we can actually kickstart a new React app, there's a couple of ways to go about that. So on the official React website, there are some recommended tool chains on how we can create a React app. So if you're learning React or creating a new single page app, their recommendation is to use Create React App. And of course, there are other different frameworks or even libraries which can help you achieve different kind of use cases. For example, if you want to send server rendered website, then go with Next.js, and a static content oriented website gets Gatsby. But for the purpose of this tutorial, we'll be using the Create React App. Simply, it's the best way to create a new React application without having any kind of overhead, simply because it helps us to bundle things like Babel and Webpack already behind the scenes, because you don't need to deal with any of those configurations and everything is taken care by the Create React Apps toolchain. So a quick note is that we need Node.js, which has to be above or equal to the version 10.16, an npm version of more than or equals to 5.6. So if you had actually installed the apps based on the link that I provided in the previous section, then you should be actually having versions above or equal to this. So with this, how do we actually create a React app? We can simply copy this command, which is npx create react app my app. Let's go to a terminal. So I'm using a Mac. This is my terminal. On Windows, you will similarly have a shell or command line that you can work with. So I'm in my directory, which is on my desktop, and I have a directory called React for all my React apps. So in this directory, I'm going to actually copy and paste that command, and this is going to take a while, so let's wait. It creates a new React app and it installs all the dependencies and all the tooling that we need. Alright, so fast forward, we are done. React says that it has successfully created an app on my directory, and we can run a couple of commands to get started. So it says to use yarn. So yarn is basically just another package manager. So npm is one, yarn is another. From my experience, I usually find yarn to be much faster in resolving the dependencies or installing them. So, but it's really your choice. So you can actually replace yarn with npm wherever you like. So now that our app is installed, we do a ls command which lists all the directories and files that we have here. So my app is here, so I'm going to cd, which is to change directory into this folder, and I'm going to do a ls here. So I can see that it has already given me a couple of files out of the box. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to open this entire directory in my code editor of choice, which is Visual Studio Code. To do that, I can use code and I space and I put a dot, which is to open in the current directory, and here we go. So it has opened up. So let me maximize this. So this is what we have out of the box. So if you see, take a look at your directory, there's going to be a couple of files and folders already here. So let me go through them one by one. The first folder that you would see on top would be node_modules. So basically, the purpose of this folder is to actually contain all the dependencies, all the node dependencies that we are using. And if you actually expand it, we can see there's a couple of dependencies already installed. There's going to be a lot of dependencies here, so I'm not going to go through them. But basically, this folder contains all the dependencies needed. Then you see a folder called public. So a public folder basically has all of our public assets. So if you're already aware, robots.txt is used to instruct on the crawling, web crawling, and we've got an index.html file. So this is one of the more important files. In the previous section, I mentioned that when a user actually visits a React-based single-page application website, what happens is that the server only returns a single file which is called index.html. and that's what we have here. So in this file we have everything that we require. This is simply a HTML file, and we see that there is a div called root, and this is exactly where our application starts, inside this div. So we'll get to more of this later, but for most parts of the tutorial you would not need to be tinkering or modifying anything in this index file. So let's go to the next folder, which is the source folder. So here's where we are going to write most of our code in, and we can already see there's some CSS files which is used to indicate how we should be styling the app. There's a JavaScript file here, and there's the index.js file. So let's go to the index.js. So what we are doing is that we are instructing React DOM to render our app. So our component is called app here, and we're going to render it inside the div whose ID is called root. So previously we saw that in the index.html file we have a div with an ID of root, and that's exactly where our app component is going to go into. And then after that we have exported the app here. So what you are seeing is mostly a lot of HTML, but it's really like a modified HTML, and we are basically writing the code in something called JSX, which is an extension of JavaScript, which allows us to write JavaScript along with HTML here. So that's on the source folder. There's a couple of other different files like your logo, which is the image, and report web vitals, which is like to check on the performance of the app. We pretty much don't need some of this, so we're going to delete it. So I'm just going to right click and I'm going to delete this file. Similarly, we are not going to delve too much into the testing part for this tutorial, so I'm going to delete this file as well. And we don't need this file, which is used for testing. Going to delete that as well. So now if we come back into the app, or actually rather the index.html file. So if you come back into the index.js file, we can actually remove this import because we no longer need this, and we can delete all of this. So simply we have imported React, we have imported React DOM, the CSS file, and of course our main component, which is app here. So once that is done, the next one what we've got is called git ignore. So in most software engineering projects we will be using git to do version control. If you haven't already, be sure to check out my introduction to Git tutorial to understand more about Git. So basically a git ignore files actually tells us what files we do not need to track. So these files we do not need to track for version control. So especially things like node modules, because I don't want to be tracking what changes go on in my node modules folder. Those are dependencies, those are not actually my own code. In this file, a package.json file, this is pretty much a very important file for you to define all the dependencies and also the scripts. So here we can see the name of our app, the version, and private is basically whether it's a private repository or not. Dependencies here. So this is a very key area where we actually define what are the dependencies our app depends on for it to run properly. So React by default requires all of these libraries to run out of the box, and hence that's why we have a node modules folder with dependencies. If you actually open up node modules, you are going to see probably hundreds or thousands of dependencies, and that is because each of these dependency might have a sub dependency underneath it, and each of these sub dependency might have even more sub dependencies beneath it. So that's why you see a lot of different packages being installed here. Next up we have the scripts. So previously, if you go back to our command line, we see that React has told us there's a couple of things we can use to run the React app, which is yarn start, yarn build, yarn test, and yarn eject. All of these scripts actually correspond to what the message says. So start, build, test, eject. Underlying it actually is going to run this command to actually execute in the background. The rest of it is pretty much mostly on configuration. ESLint is basically used for linting purposes, so you can leave it as it is. So now let's actually start our app. So we go back into our command line, and what we're going to do is that we're going to key in the command which says yarn start, because this actually starts the development server. So I'm going to enter yarn space start and I click enter, and React script start. So this is exactly what's happening underneath, because we can see start maps to this command. So here we are going to start the development server and give it a couple of seconds, and here we go. So now it says that we can actually view my app in the browser, and you can visit localhost at port 3000 to view this app. So let me just quickly open that up. So let's go back to our browser. Mostly it will be opening up automatically for you, but since I have two monitors, let me open this up here. So there we go, we have our React app up and running. So what we see here actually corresponds exactly to what we saw in app.js. So it says edit source / app.js and save to reload. So we are going to come back and we are going to open up the source folder, which is here. Let's minimize this. We come back to app.js and we see there is actually a logo which has been imported and used here. That's exactly what you see spinning there. And we see the exact text that we are seeing on the browser, which is edit and source / app.js and save to reload. So what we're going to do is that we are going to simply edit this, remove this, and put here hello world. And I'm going to hit Command plus S, or on Windows you do Control plus S, and to save this. What this does is that if you go back to your app, it automatically refreshes your page and shows the edit. So now it says hello world. So there we go. We have actually created an entire Create React app from scratch, and we have done some removal and some cleanup to our directory, and we have actually edited some of the tags, and now our app is already up and running. So on the right on VS Code, we can see this icon. So this is where we do a version control and we are able to commit our changes. So here I'm going to say cleanup code, and I'm going to commit this. And that's it. So in the next section, we'll be looking at how we can actually go about editing our source code and to build an application from scratch. I think we learn best when we do things from scratch and we actually do an actual project or web application from scratch, and this will actually help us to learn the basic concept of React really well. Hope you guys enjoyed my video, and be sure to give me a thumbs up and subscribe for more upcoming content. Catch you guys in the next video.